It's been another busy week. Hello, my name is Alex Does F1 Stuff, and welcome back to another season review or race weekend review. I need to learn what these seasons are called. So this is another race weekend review. I should actually change the title. Let me do that. Okay, that's a bit better. It is a race weekend review for round number 6 in Spain. So, as I said in the little intro-y bit at the start, it's been another busy week. Not sort of Formula 1 news, more like me personally news. I've been working a lot, about 20 odd hours at a shop. It's pretty boring. And then I've also been working on little ideas, little random F1 ideas. There's one that I've been putting like about 2 or 3 hours worth of effort into so far. It's coming together. It's just going to take me a little while to go forward. So I'm going to pop a little card to another random F1 video that's hopefully coming out Saturday, which would technically be before this video. I'll pop the card to that video in the corner. And then if you have any suggestions for other videos that you would like me to pursue along that sort of lines, then please leave them down in the comments below. But with that out of the way, we will jump on into the contents page. I have now firmly put this into the pro forma of the race weekend review. So as always, before the practice session now, there will be a little contents bit which you can skip to whichever section you want me to talk about, or you can sit through the full 30-40 minutes worth of this video about talking about the whole weekend. Again, need to structure how I say things better in my head. I just sort of hit record and go on a whim and then forget about some of the things I actually wanted to talk about. Anyway, with that out of the way, we will jump on into practice for the Spanish Grand Prix and straight into practice 1, which is dominated by Mercedes. Valtteri Bottas in first, Lewis Hamilton in second, just 4 hundredths behind, and then it's Max Verstappen in third, almost a second, 9.5 tenths back, then it's Charles Leclerc, and then it's Sebastian Vettel. Vettel is only 11 hundredths behind Charles Leclerc. So it seems that his new chassis that Ferrari have given him for his SF1000 is actually doing good for him. He's actually quick. He's better than he has been. He's a lot closer to Leclerc. It's also good to see Ferrari back up there. Yes, they're not contending with Mercedes like they were last year, but they're no longer like they were in Austria, where they were struggling. And then Hungary as well, where they were struggling to even get into the top 10. They're now firmly there, which depends on what side of the fence you sit, whether that's a good thing or not. But the big shock, Haas. Hello, where has this pace been? Where have they come from? 6th and 9th. On the soft tyre, doing some mega running, some quite high laps as well for both of them. Grosjean though, outperforming Magnussen. We've seen this in the last few races, you know. Grosjean has actually been doing much better than Magnussen has, both in practice, both in qualifying, and even the race as well. Granted, Magnussen retired from the last 2 Grand Prix, but still. It's almost reminiscent of 2019, last year, only last year, should I say, that they had that really strong qualifying pace. I mean, there was, P6 in Austria for Magnussen, there was a couple other Q3 appearances. Their one-lap pace was incredible, but their race pace was shit. And perhaps we may be starting to see this happen again, whereas before this race, they just seemed to be shit everywhere, whereas now they may be quick, but then they may be shit on their long runs, we're not 100% sure. But Albon. I'm 99% sure that's not a picture of Albon, but it's a very nice picture. Very nice picture. But Albon, 8 tenths. 8 tenths behind Verstappen. I wish there could be a video, a race review weekend, where I don't talk about Alex Albon. But I have to. One of the largest gaps so far to Max Verstappen on the same compound of tyre, on basically the same amount of laps, so you kind of can take from that what you want to believe, whether they're running the same or different programs. In my opinion, they're going to be running the same programs, otherwise they'd have been on different tyres, different amount of laps, etc, etc. But 8 tenths is a big gap. It is a very big gap. But looking further down the order, we've got the 2 Racing Points in 7th and 10th, then the 2 McLarens with Ocon sandwiched between them, with the Alfa Romeos actually coming forward, 15th and 16th, in between the 2 AlphaTauris with Ricciardo in the Renault all the way down in 18th. But it is Williams who are, I don't want to say once again last, because that was a last year's thing where you would say they're once again last. But they are last. 19th and 20th. Roy Nissany has actually taken over George Russell's seat for practice 1. The Israeli driver, his father used to drive for Minardi? Minardi question mark? I think that was Minardi. 3/10 off of Nicholas Latifi on your first outing in a Formula 1 car? Not that bad. However, the whole Williams team as a collective unit is a second, 1.1 seconds off of Ricciardo, which is very reminiscent of the 2019 days where they were a second off of everybody everywhere, and not really promising for this weekend, and not very representative of their pace so far this year. But that, yeah, it is what it is. And so to practice 2 just later on in the day, another Mercedes 1-2, and again, like the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, it is now Hamilton on top, 3/10 to Bottas, and then another 8/10 to Max Verstappen. But Ricciardo is now P4, coming from P18 in practice 1. I'm fairly sure if you were to work out the improvements from people in practice 1 to practice 2, I'm 90% sure Ricciardo's going to be at the top of that list, because he always seems to do really badly in practice 1 so far this year, at least definitely the last 2 Grand Prix, and then he just somehow pulls out a 4th or a 3rd in practice 2. It's incredible. But also Haas again, 5th, top 5 again this time, 1 position higher than practice 1, but Grosjean did come into the pits, engine issue I've written down here, lost power and had to come into the pits, didn't stop on track, but hopefully an issue that they can resolve. However, Magnussen, though, is down in P16. However, the gap from 1st to 3rd, 8/10, is the same from 3rd all the way down to 14th place, which, admittedly, Magnussen is outside of that, so I'm not quite sure where I was going with that. But it just shows how close the field is, and then also how far in front Mercedes are at the moment, that you need to be good, and then you really quickly propel up that order, because there's so little to separate everybody in between all the positions. That didn't quite tie into Magnussen and Haas, but I'll probably include that anyway. Next is Renault. Like I said, Ricciardo, P4, probably one of the best improvers from practice 1 to practice 2, but Ocon also doing well in P9 once again. It would be good to see Ocon either doing better than Ricciardo, which, I mean, he did last practice, so that he has, but maybe a bit closer. If Ricciardo can get into P4, Ocon should be able to be in the top 5 as well. But now, Racing Point. This is an odd one. I'm fairly sure they were on the soft tyre. It said on their Twitter that they were doing some long runs, which is evident by 39 laps apiece. But 8th and 11th, they were slow, or not slow, they're on the medium tyres in practice 1. But 8th and 11th, that's not very representative of Racing Point. Whether they've changed anything, I doubt it, because their car is technically legal, they just get reprimanded every time they use the illegally designed parts. I think that's the correct way of saying it. But they are behind a McLaren, behind a Ferrari, behind a Haas of all cars, and also a Renault. That's not the image they want. Sergio Perez is back in the car, but it's still a bit disappointing. And then looking further down the order, we've again got a 3/10 gap between Leclerc and Vettel, and once again an 8/10 gap between Albon and Verstappen, which is a massive bummer for Albon. It really is. You'd have thought practice 1, that's a bit of an outlier. He'll close that easily in practice 2 to maybe 5/10, maybe 4/10, maybe 3/10, who knows. But to have 2 8/10 gaps, and then a little bit further down the order, we've got Norris, Kvyat, Magnussen, and then Alfa Romeo. Again, doing well. They've actually improved. They are not last. They are 2/10 clear of Williams, who are once again last and second last. But it seems that the Ferrari-powered cars have gone forwards a little bit. Not sure why, because nothing has really changed. I don't think they've added any updates to their car or the Ferrari power unit. They may have done. Possibly. I'm not sure. but to see them not last, I suppose, is a little bit refreshing. It's just annoying to now see Williams last again like it was last year. And that is it for Practice 2, and also the running on Friday. Join me tomorrow for Practice 3 and qualifying. Okie doke, Practice 3 is all done and dusted. It is once again a Mercedes 1-2 with Max Verstappen in 3rd and Carlos Sainz in P4. It was kind of a conflicting day for McLaren, both cars running the soft tyre, but one is 4th and one is 15th. Norris, down in P15, did have a bit of an issue. He was going purple in definitely the first sector, maybe the second, I'm not sure. But he had a big oversteery moment in the last half of the track, coming into the final chicane. So that could be why he's down in P15, but it's still a bit strange to see a big disparity. It's about, what's that, 7 tenths, 7 and a bit tenths down on his teammate. It's one of the larger teammate gaps that there is. And speaking of teammate gaps, it's Albon, of course. I feel that's always going to be a subject of these kind of review things. The gap between Albon and Verstappen, the driver that I believe is currently under literally the most pressure possible, is now 6 tenths slower than Verstappen. So it's gone down. It was 8 tenths, then it was 8 tenths, now it's 6 again. So I suppose that's a good thing. We can only look forward to qualifying and see if it gets any smaller. But Racing Point seem to have gotten over their woes in Practice 1 and Practice 2 of being slightly lower than they'd have liked, in the lower reaches of the top 10 and just outside as well. Now P5 and P8, showing that they've got a little bit more pace in hand, faster than a Ferrari, faster than the AlphaTauri, but slower, most importantly, by exactly half a tenth slower than Carlos Sainz. And looking a bit further down the order, we've got the 2 Renaults, and for some reason Ricciardo's driver number is missing. That's annoying. Anyway, the 2 Renaults down in 10th and 11th. I think they'll be happy with that. I think they can be happy with that. Vettel though, down in 12th. Vettel though, down in 12th place. Again, he's lost that gap. I think he was under a tenth of a second in Practice 1 to Leclerc, and now it's 5 tenths. It's gone back up again, and there's a huge disparity between the positions. Haas have also fallen down the order back to 13th and 17th, a harsh reality punch there. But Kimi Räikkönen and Alfa Romeo seem to have some pace today, and they genuinely, at least Räikkönen at least anyway, is looking at some Q2 potential. He could genuinely do it. He's been looking quick all weekend, but look at how close that bottom half of the grid is from Räikkönen down to last place. You've got Räikkönen 11 hundredths down on Grosjean, who is just 3 thousandths down on Vettel. Norris is under a tenth back, then Kvyat is under half a tenth back, and then Magnussen is just under a tenth back as well from that. It's so very close that he's going to have to nail the lap in order to get through. But like I said, it has all gone wrong for Haas. They seem to have gone backwards. They looked really promising on Friday. Practice 1 and Practice 2 went really well. Really very well. P6, P5 doing quite good. And now they're P13 and P17. It seems like everyone shod the soft tyre and turned up their engines as engine modes have come into the news lately. A video coming out on that probably before this one comes out. Anyway, yes, it looks like everyone's gone a little bit quicker and Haas have stayed the same. And unfortunately, it is once again Williams at the bottom of the grid with Latifi half a second off of Russell. But Practice 3 was not without incident, as Esteban Ocon and Kevin Magnussen came to blows. Well, came to blows is a bit of a misleading sentence. They didn't come to blows at all. Going down the main straight, Magnussen passes Ocon on a fast lap, so he just finished a fast lap, but he had gone past Ocon. Then they go all the way through the first and second corners into turn 3. They both pull over to the right hand side, and presumably Ocon just didn't pay much attention and then almost ran into the back of him, but spun and smashed the front end of his car, which is not what the mechanics want to be seeing in Practice 3 a couple of hours before qualifying. But luckily for Ocon though, there wasn't any great deal of damage to the rear of the car, so I don't think there's going to be any gearbox changes or engine changes or things like that. It's only front end damage, but it's quite a hefty front end damage. And with that, we head to qualifying. And it wasn't a particularly interesting qualifying, not going to lie. Nothing really interesting happened. we begin with Q1. And it is Alfa Romeo who starts us off. Kimi Raikkonen has made it into Q2 for the first time this year. That is a sentence that you just shouldn't be saying. Kimi Raikkonen should always be making it into Q2, but at the minute he's in a crap car. But he's dragged that crap car into P15 and out of Q1 for the first time this year. It is Giovinazzi though down in P20. And it has definitely all gone wrong for Haas. P16 and P17 both out in Q1. I think Haas on their Twitter said definitely not the Saturday they were after such a promising Friday. And that is true. If you're well within the top 10 like they were on Friday in practice 1 and practice 2, and now to have both cars out in Q1, that's very disappointing, and something must have changed. They must have changed something. They must have looked at Friday and thought, this is awesome, how can we change this for the better? And they changed it for the worse. But biggest disappointment of Q1 is Williams. P18 and P19, they've had no pace. It's not there. They've had no pace at all this weekend. Friday they were last and second last when they had Nissany and Latifi in the car. Then they were last and second last again when Russell was back in the car. And now they're borderline last and second last. I don't know what's happened. I don't know whether it's because it's hot. I think track temperature was 49 degrees or something like that. But it just didn't seem to hook up the car at all, and they're all going to be mightily disappointed with that performance. But leaving Q1 and heading to Q2, and we start with Renault. What a disaster. A disaster for Renault. P13 and P15. Ocon, I can kind of understand. They've had to rebuild their car. He was slightly complaining about something not quite being right, and the engineer said you're going to have to put up with it. We don't have time to change it. So I can kind of understand that. Outqualified by Raikkonen in the Alfa Romeo, he will start P14, which is very, very solid. But Ricciardo, I was expecting a wee bit more from Daniel Ricciardo, definitely. But it is Sebastian Vettel, the big name that is out in Q2 by just 2 thousandths. 2 bloody thousandths, that's all it is. 2 thousandths is literally nothing. That's less than a ruler. That's less than 30 centimetres of distance. That's ridiculous. Over an entire 2.89 mile lap, to only be separated by less than a ruler, that's ridiculous. That's bonkers. But yes, out once again in Q2. What's that? He's only 2/10. He's only 2/10 down from teammate Leclerc. That's not that bad. And then we also have Danny Kvyat as well. Out. Unfortunately, he was just in, but people improved as well, such as Gasly. Mega lap to go P5, knocking out Vettel and then also his teammate. I believe it was Leclerc or somebody who went quicker to knock Kvyat out in the first place. But a little bit disappointing from the AlphaTauri, considering his teammate has gone 4/10 faster and is P5. But once again, talking about teammate gaps, it's Alex Albon. Happily into, no, not happily in the slightest through into Q2. Or Q3. Into Q3, yes. Happily, no. He's still 6/10 slower than Max Verstappen, but if he had stayed at 8/10 that the gap was in practice 1 and practice 2, he'd have been all the way down in P14. Because there's not even half a tenth separates Norris, Vettel, Kvyat and Ricciardo. Not even half a tenth. So one little mistake on that lap from Alex Albon, which could have easily happened, would have put him in P13 and out of Q2. Which really would have compounded the issues that are currently already on that guy's shoulders. And it probably doesn't help with people like myself just lambasting and talking about it all the time, but you gotta say it. You gotta always say it when it's always there. And with Q2 out of the way, we will jump on in to Q3, which, did we expect anything else? It's Mercedes. It's Lewis Hamilton on pole position, a 92nd pole position for Lewis Hamilton, and a 5th front row lockout of this year for Mercedes. 6 poles from 6 races, 5 front row lockouts. You can't ask for a much better qualifying car than this bloody Mercedes. 7/10. 7/10 faster than Max Verstappen. It's probably one of the largest qualifying margins of a car that we've ever had in Formula 1. It really must be. And then it's Racing Point. Racing Point have actually done well. They've turned their poor Friday practice around and are 4th and 5th, with Perez back in the car after his 2 races out at Silverstone and the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, and he's out-qualifying Lance Stroll. Only by a tenth of a second, but he still out-qualified Lance. Not that bad. Again though, I don't think they've got the race pace. They just don't seem to ever get it right in the race, which is really disappointing for that team, as they know they've got a quick... I say this all the time. They know they've got a quick car, and everyone knows they've got a quick car. They just don't have the race results to prove it, which is a little bit disappointing. And again, Alex Albon, P6, a qualifying that he needed. He needed this P6, but still 7 tenths now is the gap. And if it was 8 tenths, he'd have been P10. Only just over a tenth of a second, covered Albon to Gasly. That's bonkers. That is bonkers. So if Albon was still 8 tenths slower, he'd have been 10th. So it's good that he's actually improving over the weekend. He just needs to get a little bit closer than that, and then he'll be in between the racing points, and that'll be even better. But talking about that close midfield gap, I suppose, we've got McLaren, P7 and P8, separated by just half a tenth of a second. Not that bad. I think they'll be very happy with that looking at their practice performance, but again, I don't know about their race pace. I really don't. It's going to be interesting to see how well they perform. And it is Charles Leclerc who makes it into P9 for Ferrari, the only Ferrari-powered car in Q3 yet again. He is just 3 thousandths behind Norris, and then Gasly is P10 in that AlphaTauri, seriously outperforming that car, half a tenth down from the Ferrari man. And that is it for qualifying. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Unfortunately, I'm working all day, so I'm not going to be able to see the race, but join me tomorrow for the race review. What do we say about that race then? Not the best. Not the best in the slightest. Anyway, we had a race in Spain, in Catalonia, and it was won by Lewis Hamilton. Honestly, not a great big surprise there, but the gap though, 24 seconds, in a race that we thought Mercedes might just struggle with those front tyres. Look at the state of them near the end. They kind of did have a little bit of blistering on them, but nothing too big of an issue. He just managed to manage the gap really to Verstappen in second, and Bottas only P3, claiming fastest lap right at the end, although he did have it a little bit before. He did come in on lap like 64, 65 or something like that to go into a new set of mediums and blitz the track lap record. I think it was a 1:18.1 or something like that, which is a smashing new record. But still, P3 behind Verstappen, the person that he's now behind in the Drivers' Championship, not where he wanted to finish at all. So we did have an awful start though. It just didn't have a good getaway, enough of a good getaway to get behind Lewis, as by the time he got up to speed, Verstappen was already on his left, so he couldn't pull further left to go behind Lewis, which really buggered him up. And then Stroll had a mega race getting past him, and yeah, that really upset Bottas straight away. And who is next on my list? Red Bull. Alex Albon. We'll skip to Alex Albon down in 8th. Oh, 8th place. Right, I've kind of found where his issue is. It's definitely qualifying. It has to be qualifying, because he starts down in P6 or P8 or just outside the top 10, and then he can't get through all that garbage of Ferraris and McLarens and to battle the racing points, which we know the Red Bull can battle those racing points. But because he starts behind all of that garbage in qualifying, he can't get through it all. Yes, he does some spectacular overtakes. He is a good instinctive racer and will go for those moves that not many other people will. But that only gets you so far. You need to be able to start well, to start above all of this garbage that's in front of you currently, and then you can start to compete at the slightly higher level. And we've been saying it all season long that Albon needs to perform, and it's the 6th time in a row that we're saying Albon needs to perform. I can't see right now why Red Bull would want to keep him, but they have to because they've got no one else to fill his seat. And to the second Red Bull driver, Max Verstappen, got the best out of today, P2, a very strong race, kind of a little bit lambasting his own team in terms of strategy, taking it into his own hands, but still, got the most out of today, definitely couldn't have challenged for the win, even though Mercedes this morning did say that the biggest race, what's that word, what's the threat, the biggest threat did come from Max Verstappen. That threat just didn't arrive in the slightest. And to Racing Point, they finally had a good race. Finally, they've got a good race result to back up the speed of that car. Solid running from the pair. Stroll, an amazing start, up to P4, P3, I think P3 at one point, fending off Bottas for a little while for at least 5 or 6 laps. Perez doing well as also. He did get a 5-second time penalty though for ignoring blue flags against Lewis Hamilton along with Danny Kvyat slightly further down the order. But yeah, overall a very good race. Would have been Perez P4 and Stroll 5 if it wasn't for the penalty, but still 4th and 5th for the team is not bad at all. And we get to McLaren. A much better race today for McLaren. P6 for Carlos Sainz, keeping up his 100% record of scoring in Spain at his home Grand Prix, but Norris in 10th. Again, a little bit disappointing, I think. Qualifying was, again, along with Sainz. He was just behind Sainz, and at the flag, they've got 3 cars in between them. I don't know where the strategy came into it. I'm not really sure what happened because he was battling with Leclerc for a little bit, doing defensive driving really well, but then he also had the AlphaTauri that he couldn't really get past. Damn, I didn't realise there was a second picture of Lando Norris there. Well, that'll pop up now. But I finished talking about McLaren. We will move on to Ferrari. And Sebastian Vettel is P7, scoring a solid 6 points for the team as Leclerc failed to finish. But Vettel, though, still not happy with the team. Allegedly, he just didn't reply or didn't respond to any of the radio messages in qualifying for the whole qualifying session. And then even in the race, he was still questioning the strategy and swearing and all this, that and the other. He's just not a happy bunny in that car. But still, P7, not that bad at all. But I feel some people, especially on Twitter, were saying that's only because Leclerc had retired, so they couldn't focus all their attention on Leclerc because he didn't exist, so they had to focus it on Vettel. And talking about Charles Leclerc, he retired. The only retirement of this race. It was a bit of a funny one, you know. Lap 38, 37, something like that. Going into the final chicane, behind Lando Norris, his engine cuts out. That's it. His engine cuts out, rears lock, he goes into a spin, and it takes a little while to get his engine back up and running. I think he used the electrical power to start the engine, drive very slowly back to the pits, and retired. It's just odd the way that his engine cut out in the first place. There was no prior warnings. His team didn't say, we've got an engine issue, we're managing something on our side. He didn't question anything about the engine, it just stopped. Just cut out, and then he had to retire as a result. So a bit of a shame, as he would have been P7, or he would have been in the points, and Vettel probably wouldn't have been, as Ferrari wouldn't have focused their attention on him. But bit of a shame. And then we've got AlphaTauri. AlphaTauri are actually really good, you know. They're a decent midfield team. I feel they're actually punching way above their weight and consistently there. They're always there, especially Pierre Gasly in P9, scoring more points, yet again punching above his weight and showing that he can fight, that he does have that spirit and energy and everything to actually race. I think he was only half a second or a second back from Albon. That sort of gap from Vettel to Ricciardo was only about 5 or 6 seconds or something like that. It was crazy how close that midfield is compared to everybody else at the top. It was just unfortunate for Kvyat though that he did receive that 5-second penalty, otherwise I feel it would have actually been a double point score for the AlphaTauri squad. And then to Renault. Where do we begin with Renault? This was a very disappointing race for Renault. So I heard that the big boss actually turned up. at this race is he had the choice of turning up to Spain to watch Renault, to see how well they've progressed, or he had the choice to go to Berlin to watch Nissan in the Formula E. You should have gone to Nissan in Berlin, mate. They did better there than Renault did here. 11th and 13th. Friday was okay. Friday was okay for Renault. Ricciardo was up in P4 at one point. Granted, he was down in P18 as well. And then qualifying, not so much. Both cars out in Q2. And then the race, they just struggled. It's an odd one, Renault. They should be in the points. They should have progressed at some point. 2018 was a cracking year. 2019 was not so cracking. And now 2020 is again not so cracking. And unfortunately, due to all the regulation freezes, etc., they're going to have much the same year next year. And then also Ocon. I don't know what's happened to Ocon. Where's his spark? Where's his energy? Where's everything gone that he used to have when he was racing Perez? He doesn't seem to have that against Ricciardo. And heading towards the tail end of the field, we've got Alfa Romeo. They can genuinely be very, very, very happy with today. P14 and P16, and not the slowest car on merit at all. Raikkonen, solid in qualifying, through to Q2 for the first time this year, and then P14 at the flag, exactly where he started. Solid running. Giovinazzi P16, we didn't really see much of them on the TV, but again, it was a really boring race. Not much happened, so I'm hardly surprised. And then we've got Haas. Again, Haas did all right. Not the slowest car, although Grosjean was last, but he did have a little bit of a Tokyo drift moment going into turn something, the flat out corner before the straight into the hairpin as you go into the third sector, turn 7, maybe, I don't really know turn names. Or numbers, they don't have names. Some have names, some don't. Anyway, yes, Grosjean had a bit of a Tokyo drift moment, but Magnussen, P15, in between the two Alfa Romeos and in front of the Williams. The Williams definitely had a crap weekend. Definitely a crap weekend for Williams, one to forget. Very slow in all the practices, last and second last, and third from last and second from last. It just very disappointing. Neither car through to Q2 at all in qualifying, and then in the race, they're just slow again. I feel this could have been a bogey track, and we'll see what happens when we go to Spa in 2 weeks' time. Not much is going to change, I don't think. And with the little race review out of the way, we will head on to the championships. Lewis Hamilton now enjoys a comfortable 37-point margin over Max Verstappen, who extends his margin over Valtteri Bottas now to 6 points. Leclerc is now P4 in the championship, as Albon and Stroll also clear Norris, who falls to P7, Perez 8th, Sainz 9th, Ricciardo and Ocon failing to score are now 10th and 11th, with Vettel moving up to 12th. Then it's Gasly, Hülkenberg, Giovinazzi, Magnussen, with Latifi, Raikkonen, Russell and Grosjean yet to score. And on the other side, we've got Mercedes, 221 points to Red Bull's 135, the largest point gap we have seen so far. Racing Point are now back to 3rd, with McLaren 4th and Ferrari 5th. Just 3 points. 3 points, that's all it is that's covering those 3 teams there. Renault, a sort of lonely 6th place, comfortably in front of AlphaTauri, but a little bit far behind from Ferrari. And then you've got AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, Haas and Williams. And as a little visual representation of all of that data, you've got some graphs. You've got Hamilton clearly above everybody. You've then got Verstappen and Bottas clearly above that jumbled mess of the midfield down below. And again, it's much the same in the Constructors' Championship. Mercedes leaps and bounds above everybody else. Red Bull leaps and bounds above the midfield. And then you've got the midfield. And that is all I've got for you today, guys. I hope you have enjoyed that race weekend review, and I will catch you in the next video with whatever and whenever I decide to make it. I'll see you guys then.